So, good day everyone. My name is Jinli Viednes and I was tasked to report about the pre-colonial era. So, the Philippine literature in different era has specific characteristics in every era that was occurred here in the Philippines. That includes the pre-colonial era literature that is characterized based on oral tradition and crude on ideology and phraseology. So pre-colonial literacy pieces transferred in traditional narratives and speeches. So Philippine folk tales, epics, poems, and chants existed in the most ethno-linguistic groups or were passed from generations to generations through word of mouth. The diversity and richness of Philippine literature evolved side by side with the country's history. So this can be the best appreciated in the context of history of the country, the pre-colonial cultural tradition, and the socio-political histories of its colonial and contemporary tradition. The average Filipino and familiarity with this or this era, because this is more on indigenous groups, indigenous literature, and was largely due to what has been impressed upon this era. Talking to the works, the masterpiece on or the literature of this era, owing to the works of our own archaeologists, ethnologists, and anthropologists, we are able to know more and better judge information about our pre-colonial times, set against a bulk of material about early Filipinos as recorded by Spanish, Chinese, Arabic, and other chronicles of the past. So pre-colonial inhabitants of our islands showcase a rich past through their folk speeches, folk songs, folk narratives, and indigenous rituals and mimetic dances that affirm our ties with our Asian neighbors. And the most seminal of these folk speeches in the riddle, which is Tigmo in Cebuano, Bugtong in Tagalog, Paktakon in Ilonggo, and the Patutudon in Bicol. So central to the riddle in the talinghaga or metaphor, because it reveals subtle resemblance between two unlike objects, and one's power of observation and wit are put to the test. While some riddles are indigenous, others verge on the absence of sex-related. So what I'm trying to imply is that pre-colonial era is an era in which indigenous groups are emerged in these times. As what I've said, indigenous peoples are emerged in this time. A pre-colonial era was filled with indigenous people in a healthy trade with various cultures and economies in the region and the foreign trades or the traders. Generally, for lack of better terminology, prehistoric people are described to be animistic, and their practice was a collection of beliefs and cultural mores anchored in the idea that the world is inhabited by spirits and supernatural entities, both good and bad, and that respects be accorded to them through nature worship. Thus, they believe that their daily lives has a connection of such beliefs. That's the reason why in every era that was occurred here in the Philippines, it has a different characteristics in every era. That includes the pre-colonial era. So its characteristics are based on oral tradition, because there are more on indigenous people believing in supernatural entities. So let's go forward to the literary forms of pre-colonial era, wherein their literary form is the myth. So I've guessed that you know what myth is, right? So myth, it is a narrative that describes and portrays in symbolic language the origin of basic elements and assumptions of a culture. Mythic narrative relates, for example, how the world began, how humans and animals created, how certain customs, gestures, or forms of human activities originated, and almost all creatures possessed or one time possessed and live in terms of myth. So for example, talking about how the world began, there is another dimension. There is a life before death. That's a myth. That's example of a myth. And also if someone says that there is a black hole or something like that, so that's a kind of myth. Just consider a myth if it is somewhat like a traditional story, especially one concerning the early history of a people, or explaining some natural or social phenomenon, and typically involving supernatural beings or creatures, like ancient Celtic myths. And one example for myth in the pre-colonial era is the how moon and stars came to be. So for this one, it talks about a myth wherein we are having these philosopher questions in our minds, that how come the moon and the stars came to be. So it is a story wherein how the moon and stars has created. And yeah, it is a traditional story, a fiction, it's somewhat like a fictional or something. But the moral lesson is that don't be too preoccupied with vain personal beauty. Work comes first. Too much self-indulgence is bound to compromise on things that really counts. So don't just focus on the beauty on it. Just focus on how you can get there, or somewhat like it is a don't focus yourself on about beauty, and just go with the flow, because beauty will fade. Just focus on what's within yourself, embracing what's really count, or what counts for this day, because that's the most important thing, based on the myth that was created. And yeah, just don't focus on it, just focus on what really counts, because it will just fade away and it will never last. And for more information regarding this one, to continue this topic about epic, to continue, I have my pair, my classmate, Editha Dingal, who will continue to report regarding the my groupmate will continue to discuss about this topic about pre-colonial colonial era, and I hope you learned from it. Thank you.